Ready when we're
Yep.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Parks Committee for February 13th, 2023. I'm Barbara Zoller-Bringer, the co-chair of the committee. And I want to welcome you to tonight's meeting. We are already recording in compliance with New York State open meetings law. So this meeting is available following this meeting online. It's our practice here to conduct remote meetings with all committee members, cameras on. Public attendees can leave them on or not as they so wish. It's always helpful if you do have them on, if you speak. And we ask everybody who's not speaking to please mute your microphones until such time as you speak. We have, in my mind, a very exciting meeting tonight. I have been advocating for this quite a while and have been really looking forward to it. I think climate change and parks is just a natural combination. There's both the impact of climate on parks and it's the impact that parks can have on retarding climate change. So I'm hoping tonight is really just the start of a discussion. Talk about, hopefully I want people to think about what we could do individually in this area, what we could do as a committee and as a community. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion and future discussions. So when we get to the presentation part of the meeting, I would suggest that we hear from the three presenters first and then take any questions and discussion. I want to make sure all of the presenters get the amount of time we've allotted for them. And I hope you're at least half as excited about tonight for me as I am. I just wanted to introduce my co-chair, Andrew Laskowecki, and our wonderful secretary, Thomas H. And thank you so much. And then we'll just go around. Jennifer, should we start with you? I see you on my screen.
Hi, Jennifer Melby, member of the committee. Good evening.
Andy, you're next.
Hi, Andy Dieterich, member of the committee. Good evening.
Richard.
Hi, Richard Morrow, community member of the meeting.
Doug.
Hi, everybody. Doug Bettner, member of the committee.
Mackenzie.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Fellow.
Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Hubbard Kamanan Weary, a member of the board and the committee.
Lenny.
Hi, Lenny Levington, member of the committee.
So I just want to make sure I haven't left out any committee members. Oh, Melinda.
Hi, everyone.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Melinda?
Oh, yes, sorry. Hi, my name is Melinda Rasco, and I am a member of our committee, Parks and Recreation. I live in Borum Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. As I mentioned right before we started, I'd like to make one change in the agenda. I'd like to have Michelle present first, then Shakara, and then Hannah. So with that, do I have a motion to accept the agenda? Doug, Richard, all in favor?
Hi.
Thank you. And let's turn now to December's meeting minutes. I'm sorry, we didn't have a meeting last month. I just had a couple of quick things on the minutes. I noticed we had a motion in support of the Bridge Plaza Community Garden. I motion, but it's not clear here who seconded the motion. Does anyone remember? They were the ones to second the motion. And then I would just suggest at the bottom of page 3, last sentence, it says today only about 0.6 acres of the park are accessible. Then it says to the park. I would just take out those words, to the park. Otherwise, from my perspective, I thought these were fabulous, fabulous minutes. So thank you. Does anyone have any changes to December meeting minutes? Seeing none, I'll assume you adopted these minutes, and if you have any other changes, just let me know or let Taya know. All right, we're moving on now to our presentation, which is really climate change in parks. At this time, is there anyone from the community who has a comment about this agenda? So I think I've given you my introduction to this subject. I think it's there's very little that's more important than climate. Everybody on this call and everyone we encounter. Jennifer, did you want to say something? Your hand is up. So with that, I think we're going to start with Michelle Mueller, Manager of Climate Change Research at the Central Park Conservancy. And I think she's going to set the stage for this discussion by giving us some insight into what the latest research shows on this topic. So without further ado, Michelle, I also want to thank you because you led me to some other people to speak tonight. So I'm turning this over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. It's so nice to be with all of you. I'm actually a member of Community Board 2 and live right next to Fort Greene Park. So it's also nice to be plugged in with my neighbors. And like Margaret has said, I'm the manager of climate change research at Central Park Conservancy, and we have a research and planning division where we're studying the impacts of climate change on urban parks within New York City. And this is really a partnership with Natural Areas Conservancy. They're a nonprofit based in New York City who works directly with the Parks Department to kind of restore and study natural areas within New York City. But they also work with municipalities across the United States on managing their natural areas within the cities. And then it's also a partnership with the Yale School of the Environment. So I thought I would just kind of set the stage and give us some context on climate change within New York City. So we know that there are increases in temperature, that the mean annual temperature in New York City has increased from 4.4 degrees Fahrenheit from 1900 to 2011. And within the 2020s, these are projected to increase by 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the 2050s, 4 to 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And I also want to note that it's not that the peak heat is increasing, but it's actually the days below freezing that we're losing. So that's an observed impact. We're also seeing increases in annual precipitation. It's increased about 7.7 inches from 1900 to 2011. And then this is projected to continue to increase. And we know that it's not increasing uniformly across the year, but that there are peak periods of concentrated precipitation. And then, as you all know, sea level rise, that at the Battery, it's increased 1.1 feet since 1900 and is expected to continue to rise. We know that there are heat waves that are becoming more frequent, more intense, longer in duration, heavy downpours, coastal flooding, and periods of drought, which we saw this summer. And also today is an indicator of a warmer day. And so in urban parks, this can lead to flooded landscapes, deteriorated turf, damage to infrastructure in parkland, the increased prevalence of invasive species, which are already really hard to manage, pests and pathogens. Without those days below freezing, we can often see pests and pathogens surviving throughout the winter and not kind of going through their natural cycle of loss during winter, marsh migration, general plant stress and mortality. We've seen a lot of windfall events and loss in tree canopy, soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, and really important changes in plant and animal communities, the insect and bird relationships. And then just plant competition and altered regeneration. So there's a term called the plant hardiness zone, and that's typically where a specific species is found within the United States, and we're seeing shifts in that plant hardiness zone northwards. And just general loss of ecological and the social benefits that we gain from having natural areas or green spaces within our urban environment. This is just I specifically work within Central Park, and I think it'd be interesting to do something larger scale in the city and urban parks, but just to paint the picture that at Central Park, we have documented evidence of losing trees to extreme events. And it's often not just in these large storms like Superstorm Sandy, but it's also in these kind of microburst events where we get really strong windfalls, and we're seeing trees who, maybe are over 150 years old falling. And then I don't need I feel like I don't need to say this to you all, but just it's urgent to protect urban parks in the face of climate change. It's a matter of environmental justice. We know that communities of color have historically had less access to open green space and the health benefits that they provide. And also parks that potentially don't have as much resources to adapt to climate change are often in these communities. So this really needs to go across the city. And then just to set the stage on how parks help us in the face of climate change, we know that they can help in mitigation or kind of the root cause of emissions. So helping hold and capture greenhouse gases, specifically, it's not greenhouse gases, carbon. And then adaptation, can help reduce the vulnerability to climate change. And that's really seen in heat, but also in absorption of stormwater runoff in flooding events. And then there are strategies that park managers can take on to enhance, to adapt in the face of climate change. So just managing and maintaining forest wetlands and grasslands, making sure to remove invasive species, looking at diverse species lists, acquiring additional land and protecting it within urban areas, planting more trees, converting lawns or grasses to natural areas, generally reducing pavement and impervious surfaces, and then looking within parkland where you can retrofit your buildings or vehicles to reduce energy. But generally, there's a lack of funding, there's a lack of downscaled climate information. A lot of climate research is done kind of at the regional or global scale. And so when you get into an urban environment, it gets more difficult to understand how vegetation or plant species are going to respond. Lack of awareness of the role of urban parks and green and blue spaces in cities, and just lack of coordination and scale across all parks, especially in New York City. We have a lot of parks that are kind of run through Conservancy's models. And so there's a lot of information that's not shared across them. And so that's why we have the Central Park Climate Lab. I'm not going to go into it, but we're working to try to study some of these issues and provide some information. This summer, we did a quick pilot study. NAC had this larger study throughout the United States, where they asked the question of what's the air temperature difference between forested natural areas that are in healthy condition as compared to those that are not in healthy condition or have a large prevalence of invasive species or degraded. And then we sought to understand just what's the difference between vegetated cover types within urban parks. So like when you're going through a park, you might have a woodland, you might just have like a lawn with some trees, you might have a paved surface, maybe where there's a basketball court or another, playground. And then we also wanted to study between street trees and just to understand the cooling, the difference within those landscapes. And we found that on the warmest day of the summer, the Central Park woodlands were 10 degrees cooler than the street trees. And that sensors placed on trees within kind of open maintained lawns were 5 degrees cooler than street trees. And then also that these differences are often magnified during heat waves. These are just a few graphs to show that difference. This is the mean, but you can see during temperatures during the day and versus nighttime. And just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be looking on, we've done some research, like interviews with our staff to understand how they're seeing impacts of climate change. We're working with Yale to use satellite imagery to kind of study change over time and true mortality. We actually, I think many parks within New York City have kind of a census that was run in the 1930s of different tree species. And so we're looking to digitize that and compare that with our current assets. But also we're working with other park conservancies to kind of scale up some of this research so that other folks can have talking points. Okay, so I'll stop there. We're also writing a sustainability plan. A lot of other parks are doing that, but just wanted to mention there are things that park organizations can do. Okay, I'll stop sharing and pass it over.
Thank you for that. Sounds like there's a lot more there that we want to hear about, but for the moment, we're going to move on. Our next presenter is a little closer to home, work-wise. It's Shakara Petaway, who's the Senior Manager of Park Projects and Programs at our nearby Fort Greene Park Conservancy. She has a very exciting program to tell us about that's going on there right now.
Right, just give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. But I also want to say while I'm doing that, that it was very exciting to hear from Michelle. A lot of the information that she was sharing is sort of some of the things that we discuss with our Greene team. So I'm super excited to kind of follow that and talk more from the perspective of environmental education. And thanks for that introduction, Barbara. So I'll just reintroduce myself very quickly. So as she said, I am my name is Shakara. I work for Fort Greene Park Conservancy, and for some reason my title got cut off at the bottom there, but I am the Senior Manager of Park Projects and Programs at Fort Greene Park. And what that means is, in addition to leading our programs, which include our public programs, such as our Black History and Culture tours, or our Music in the Grove, Halloween Fest, Earth Day celebrations, leading the team that sort of creates those programs, and the team that also leads our volunteer opportunities. I am also in charge of the environmental education happening in Fort Greene Park. And so I'm very excited because we actually very recently, actually this past September, launched a new program called Greene Team that is specifically focused on teens in the area. So I'm going to dive a little deeper into that. But first, I kind of want to talk about some of the reasonings behind why we thought Greene Team was a very important project to pursue in the park. So just to sort of lay things out, demographic wise, we have this very sort of interesting contrast in the demographics from the north to the west, south, and east side of the park. And you can see sort of laid out, one of the things I really want to pull out is as far as socioeconomic. So west, south, and east of the park, the area median income is $118,000. But when we get to the north side of the park, that drops significantly to about $40,000, just over $40,000 for the median income. And we also see a difference in who has an income of less than $10,000, where north side of the park, that tends to be 12.5% of the population. Southeast and west is 2.7% of the population. This is based on recent census. And then you also see racially, where we tend to have in the higher income areas, more people who identify as white, versus the lower income regions where people identify mostly as Black, but we also have different minority groups there as well. And so that's something that we think a lot about in our work as a conservancy, is that we are kind of serving these vastly different demographics within the park. Yeah, so kind of moving from there, we want to frame things through a lens of environmental justice. And so that's something that, of course, Michelle mentioned earlier in her slides, and I want to kind of dive a little deeper into. So as a quick definition of environmental justice, which you might hear me shorten to EJ, just the kind of pithy way that people say it sometimes, is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Now, this is important because in addition to sort of the socioeconomic differences that we see on the different borders of Fort Greene Park, also the north side of the park is part of a federally recognized environmental justice community. And so what that means is that people living in that region have a higher exposure to environmental issues such as air pollution, and that's specifically the BQE being right there. So we have higher rates of asthma on the north side of the park, higher rates of obesity, diabetes, all of those things. And those tend to be congregated in areas of environmental justice. And sort of interesting that we have this one border where we have those issues. And then on the surrounding areas of the park, the rest of the areas of the park, it's not as much of a problem there, if at all. So what is Green Team? So Green Team, as I said, is our new environmental education program. They are a diverse cohort of teens. I know up there it says ages 13 to 19. We actually shifted that to ages 14, and our current cohort is actually maximum age 17, although we did open applications to people as old as 19 years of age, the majority of which live in public housing adjacent to the park. And the goal with Green Team is we're teaching them to mitigate and potentially resolve environmental harms and public health risks in the area through hands-on education and training, youth-led research, intergenerational collaboration, mentorship, with the goal of creating a project that they will design and then implement around green infrastructure that is meant to resolve some of the environmental issues currently facing in Fort Greene Park. So some of those issues, just off the top of my head, one thing we really deal with in the park is erosion. Erosion is something that a lot of people don't necessarily think of as this kind of big environmental sustainability issue. But when you consider the fact that soil is, contrary to popular belief, a non-renewable resource, and when things erode, they tend to go into the riverways and get washed away, then that is a serious issue. We also have issues because of the density of the area. We have a lot of use in the park, which means that there's some issues with the care. So even leading into that erosion, you guys are probably familiar, if you've been to Fort Greene Park, with a lot of areas that are just kind of dusty, including our former Dust Bowl, which luckily is no longer like that, thanks to the wonderful work of the Parks Department. And of course, Fort Greene Park Conservancy, but a lot of that is usage and not really being able to sort of match to the amount of wear and tear that's happening in the park. And that once again can lead to further erosion in the park. And then of course, we have to think about all of the trees, which Michelle did such a great job of explaining why trees are such an important part of the health of the environment and of the city, with carbon capture, with reducing the amount of heat in the environment, and so on and so forth. And so there's definitely quite a few issues that are happening in the park, even though it's a very much beloved and very well used and actually really well taken care of park. Especially when you consider other parks don't have the same level of care, unfortunately, in New York City. So one of the things that I really wanted to think about in terms of creating Green Team was that we had to make this as inclusive as possible, especially as we're teaching through a lens of environmental justice. So one of the things we determined was that we wanted to pay all of our cohort members a stipend, because we have to acknowledge that a lot of times environmental programs or volunteer efforts and so on and so forth are sort of unpaid options. And if you're dealing with teens who might be coming from low income backgrounds, they might actually need to have income coming in to help support their family. And so in order to make this accessible to everyone and an option for everyone, we need to make sure that we're able to pay teens instead of hoping that they come out of just the interest, their own interest, because they could have the interest, but they might not have the ability to participate in a program like this. We also wanted to make sure that all of the work that is being done is done during our regularly set Greene team hours. So we meet twice a week, once on Friday, once on Saturdays. I said 5 hours, it's actually a total of about 4 to 5 hours, sometimes dependent on certain things. But yes, so we make sure that when it comes to their education, them learning about the environmental risks happening in the park, learning about environmental justice, learning about trees and soil and all of that, that is happening within the time that they're there. They are also going to be designing projects. They're in fact starting that design process right now, and that's all going to be kept within that framework so that they can still focus on homework and focus on, if they have to have other jobs, they have that capacity. We're not trying to, once again, we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And then my favorite part was that we set a goal of having 50% of our cohort members be residents of Farragut, Whitman, and Ingersoll houses. If you guys are familiar with the geography, Whitman and Ingersoll are directly to the north of the park, and then a little further north, we have Farragut houses as well. And so we wanted to make sure that members of the EJ community are actually a part of this program. So we were fortunately successful. We were able to recruit we opened 12 slots up for our first cohort. So of that, we were able to recruit 11 teens between the ages of 14 and 17. 6 of them are residents of Whitman, Ingersoll, and Farragut houses. So we went over our 50% goal, which was great. And then I thought it was really wonderful that we were able to find teens that sort of had a mixture of career interests. So they weren't all specifically interested in the environment or environmental justice or sustainability. Some were focused on computer science, music, different creative activities. I think one wanted to be a surgeon. We just have a bunch of different sort of interests that are coming together to learn about environmental justice in the park. So definitely the goals with this program. So for the sort of like short-term goals, obviously the kids are working on developing and implementing green infrastructure in the park. And I think I should pause because I realized I didn't quite define green infrastructure. So that is specifically infrastructure solutions that are that involve plant life in their creation. So if you think about, for instance, rain gardens, which are formed as a way to sort of mitigate flooding and do a lot of that water capture. That is sort of this creation of a structure where we have specific plants that have been selected to be able to sit in water for periods of time and draw in that extra water. There's a design of the soil to be able to hold onto that so it's not going into the sewer system and everything. So that's just one kind of green infrastructure that they could potentially create in the park. Another goal is that we want to expose these teens to the diversity of career options, because working in the environment doesn't just have to be working as a farmer or working as a gardener or working for a parks conservancy. There can be a number of different options. And so we did pull together this beautiful advisory committee of different environmental professionals. We have landscape architects, arborists, an engineer, composters, gardeners, of course, sustainability consultant, just like a nice diverse group of people. And they are in the process of coming to different sessions and speaking to the teens and telling them how they got to their career options and sort of giving them a sense of, okay, if I am interested in following this pathway, what do I have to do to get there? So it's helping them to be able to think about that early. But the main takeaway here is that we are trying to help diversify the racial and gender makeup of environmental jobs. And so one thing I like to think about and sort of like illustrate is a lot of times, even in conservancies or in the parks department, you'll find that people of color tend to be in the roles that are very much on the ground, which Personally, I was a gardener before. I love being on the ground. I love farming, gardening, composting, all that stuff. But when you come to positions of decision making, administrators, executive directors, so on and so forth, then it tends to get wider after a while. And so we're trying to encourage that there be more decision making from groups of people who are actually most impacted by environmental issues. And so that tends to be people of color in low income areas. I didn't want to go into too much detail about some of the things that they have learned so far, because I know we're kind of like short on time. So just a quick overview of different ways that you can help with our organization or other environmental education opportunities. There actually are quite a lot of programs in the city, but unfortunately limited slots as there are. I would say if you know any teens or young people, definitely encourage them to participate in these different environmental education programs, but also encourage them to volunteer if they have that capacity at their local parks, community gardens, and other environmental organizations. There are definitely some great opportunities out there. I mean, speaking for Fort Greene Park Conservancy, we have a lot of wonderful volunteer opportunities in addition to this great program. I also would encourage you beyond Fort Greene Park and beyond environmental education to just, as a citizen, advocate for sustainability efforts that are inclusive, regardless of whether your income, your race, whatever might be potential barriers. A good example of this is when you think about NYCHA, they only relatively recently, compared to the rest of New York City, got recycling as an option in those buildings. And that was a sort of like income barrier issue right there. And so just like thinking about what are some things that if you are of a higher income or have more access to things, what are those things you have access to that your neighbors may not? And then, of course, spread the word about Green Team. We're going to be having applications open again in the summer for our second cohort. We're still currently on our first cohort. They'll be going through May of this year, and we're really excited about the projects that they're working on. So hopefully you should also keep an eye out for that. We'll be posting on our social media if you guys want regular updates about everything. So that's it for me. I know I did a lot of talking. I'm definitely very excited for Hannah's presentation as well. But if you guys are interested in following up, there is my contact information, and I'm happy to hear from anyone.
Shakara, that was wonderful. Thank you. Maybe you could come back with a couple of the participants in the Green Team, and we could hear from them once May, get to May through June. I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Then maybe they might be interested in joining the community board.
Yes, I think you guys definitely need more young participants.
Yes. So thank you for that. All right, I gotta take a deep breath. That was a lot. That was a lot to absorb. We turn now to Hannah Empel, who's the program analyst at the city's program of the Nature Conservancy. So Hannah, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you to the whole committee here. It's really nice to be with you, Community Board 2 in Brooklyn. I'm also going to share my screen, so just give me 1 second to do that. All right, can everyone see that? So it's so nice to go last after 2 incredible presentations, because it means that I can actually kind of go through a lot of my slides really quickly and kind of get to some of the meat of what we're here to talk to you all about tonight. So the Nature Conservancy in New York, we are a science-based organization, part of the global nonprofit conservation organization. We actually work in 70 different countries. But here in New York City, we have a program called the Future Forest NYC Initiative. And we really use a combination of science and partnership with communities. We bring people together through our work with Forest for All NYC, which I'm going to talk more about in a moment, to really impact policy. We use, a variety of data analysis approaches. So these documents here are some of our foundational work. And what I'm really excited to be here talking about tonight is this opportunity we have that our all 5 borough presidents have come out in support for the idea of a million more trees initiative, which is really exciting news. I'm hoping everyone's had an opportunity to look. There's a draft community board resolution document that's really designed as a customizable template. So community boards in Manhattan and now increasingly in Brooklyn have looked at this. We're planning to go to all 5 boroughs and, do more of these presentations to, share information about the state of the urban forest in New York City and kind of get people excited about the potential to have these million more trees. So, some of this has already been covered, so I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. This is just 2 maps really illustrating something that Michelle covered really nicely around the urban heat island effect, and you can see the vegetation. This is 2017, which for this type of data is the most recent year that we have, looking at the tree canopy specifically. And you can see where our parks over on the right really jump out. So the purple zones are actually the coolest parts of the city. And if you, zoom right in, I think you can even actually see Fort Greene on there. Obviously the big part there is Prospect Park, but every park, is making a difference, as, Michelle talked about. So when we talk about the urban forest, we're actually talking about all 7 million trees across all types of land. And that includes our parks, so those forested areas, but also the street trees, and importantly, the trees in people's front and backyards, depending on where they live. I realize not everyone has a yard, but many of our neighbors in, South Brooklyn, parts of Queens, Staten Island, et cetera, do have yards. So those trees are all counted, and they're all helping to be part of this, incredible network, this incredible system, urban forest. So again, the benefits of the urban forest in some ways are really tied into those benefits that you see around parks. But again, the trees themselves are really powerhouses for climate change. So again, storing carbon, cooling the air, reducing stress. And there's all these studies showing that actually, taking a walk amongst trees can lower your blood pressure. Trees can really provide a sense of cohesion in a community. I'm sure that anyone that's been involved with any kind of stewardship work or some of the things that Shakara was talking about, where you're, coming together with neighbors to be, tending to your local park or your local green space, like that has an incredible benefit to people. So we're in support of all of that. Currently across the 5 boroughs, there's a 22% canopy cover. And when we talk about tree canopy, we're really literally talking about the shade that trees can provide. So if you have like a beautiful block with these mature trees, kind of touching in the middle, that's like reaching 100%. Or if you're in a forested area where it's really dense, that's also 100%, compared with, a street that has no trees, that's 0. So there's kind of, a continuum within that. And I'll get to our goal in a moment, but really we want to see the city overall getting to more like 30% canopy cover by 2035. And that was a goal that was picked to be, both informed by science. So it's achievable. We know it's possible, but it's also ambitious. And we're also using data to track changes in the canopy over time. So the areas here on these maps that are standing out a little bit more, kind of the oranges and reds, those are places where there has been a negative change between 2010 to 2017. And again, some of that's due to some of these extreme weather and climate related events, major trees affected by storms and things like that. And then coming here to the Brooklyn maps, you can get a little bit more of a close look. So Community Board 2 is, somewhat on the higher end compared to other parts of Brooklyn in terms of the current canopy cover. But with this dark blue, is showing is actually like really great news. You're on the higher end for improvement. So, we're always looking for, opportunities to show people kind of, where things can get better, and you're already doing great work in your community. The other thing that we're using information or data and information to guide is this thinking around where could these new trees go? So we're trying to estimate or, figure out, what is practical canopy? There's what is feasible and where could a tree physically go into the ground? And then there's what is desirable. And we realize those are not always the same thing. And that's where these community board level presentations really come into play, because we know that, local people should have a say in, where new trees go into the ground. and that, you know, there's all kinds of local contexts. And this really brings me to the equity piece of the conversation, which again, like Shakara really touched on and made, I think, very real with, you know, talking about these 11 individuals who are contributing through the Greene Team program. So, you know, I'm just going to kind of move forward a little because I know we have a lot here to get to, and I'm sure there's questions. So one of the things that we work on as a team is really advocating for better funding for the care and management of our existing trees. So again, the New York City Parks Department is responsible for, you know, a lot of the public land, including our street trees. Their budget, you know, this is an average across a few different fiscal years, but is, you know, a tiny fraction, less than 1% of our total city budget. And within that, their forestry specifically is an even tinier fraction. So those 7 million trees are really in need of some additional support. Other challenges that they're facing, again, climate change, pests, Michelle mentioned that really well. And then this issue of disparate management. So while New York City Parks does, you know, have responsibility for a lot of our trees, there are many that are on private land. So those are really, you know, not regulated. There's no coherent management plan or protection for those at all. And there's also different entities. Actually, something that's really interesting is that NYCHA campuses actually have a disproportionately high number of trees compared to the land coverage. And because NYCHA is a huge presence of, you know, creating neighborhoods and housing within New York City, that's actually really positive. They do not always have the funding and support to care for their trees. So there's a need there as well. So that brings me to the work of Forests for All NYC. This is a growing coalition that the Nature Conservancy is kind of the lead convener of. Found one of the founding members. There are over 80 groups at this point, including the Central Park Conservancy and the Natural Areas Conservancy, which, you know, Michelle mentioned that partnership. And actually, Fort Greene Park Conservancy participated in one of our events that we did. We did a citywide stewardship day this past October. They put on a great event there. So really our vision is to, you know, have this healthy, robust, you know, urban forest that includes not just the trees, but all the people that work and support the urban forest, and to, you know, ensure that the protection, the management, and the growth of that really is equitable and just, and its delivery of all of these, you know, the many benefits. We really want New York City to be a leader on urban forestry. This is a list of the growing current membership. There might actually be a few organizations who've just joined in the last week who are not reflected on this list. But if you in your, you know, other work outside of your community board service are part of civic organizations or other, you know, groups that you think should be a part of this coalition that want to work on increasing the total number of trees and the health of trees in New York City, please, you know, feel free to reach out. And these are kind of some of the key drivers. We're really organizing our work again. A lot of things that connect to what's already been shared. This is the New York City Urban Forest Agenda, is really a foundational and guiding document for our group. We have this overarching goal of achieving 30% canopy cover by 2035. And then we've organized, you know, kind of different strategies and how to get there into 12 overall strategies or approaches, including actually a lot of focus on workforce development. So a lot of the things that, you know, Shakara was sharing as part of the work that they're doing in the park, that's really consistent with how we view this, that there needs to be an improved pipeline for urban forestry careers that, again, is addressing equity and specifically racial equity. So this is kind of a close-up look of what our different action items are and kind of how we're thinking about them. You can see under the green column there, cultivating urban forest careers. So not just, you know, increasing the total number of jobs, but again, doing so equitably. And here's a few different ways to get involved. So again, this community board resolution is really designed to, you know, let, you know, all of the borough presidents know, yes, there's support at the community level for doing this again. People are excited. We want to help you with that. So, you know, happy to answer any questions about, you know, the specifics. You know, if we want to fill in any of the data points, we can help you with that. Learn more about Forests for All. We have a website. You can take a look at the New York City Urban Forest Agenda, which again has these kind of frameworks and guiding ideas on how we can all work together. to take care of the urban forests. We're on social media. This email address is for our coalition manager at Forest for All NYC. And then this is just kind of a resource list. So I can put any of the links afterwards into the chat. And this is my email address. I'm also happy to answer questions. So I'll pause there. I feel like there's plenty more that all of us could have shared, but this it was really nice to get a chance to share this presentation with you. And I welcome any questions. I'm looking forward to talking more. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you again to all of our presenters. I really appreciate it. I think this was a really nice mix of what people are doing, and there's a lot of intersection in what the three of you spoke about. And I know I have a number of questions, and I'm hoping you'll come back again as we move forward. But so first, I'm going to open this up to Parks Committee members. Are there any Parks Committee members who have a question? Richard, I'm not surprised you have a question. And I'm sure whenever you're going to be one of our leading stewards of taking care of trees, I'm sure you have something valuable to add here.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah, I am the captain of the tree stewardship program for Parks Department. I prune all the trees in Dumbo, Vinegar Hill, around Farragut, and the North Heights. So I'm really excited about your programs. It's really wonderful. I was wondering, have any of you seen the latest from the Lancet, the publication? They just did a study on cooling cities through urban green infrastructure. And I'll try to get it in the link, but Taya can tell you I'm very bad at that. At any rate, what it showed was pretty much what you're talking about, is that the urban heat islands that we have created with the population weight has just caused premature, what they're saying here, it caused over 3,000 premature deaths during the summer. Now, they did it in 93 countries, so they took a real big spectrum of cities and what was happening. So I think what you're doing is essential to save the city, and especially save people's lives. Like I said, I'll try to get that into the link. The other thing is you may want to consider also the street trees. They need a lot of help. You know, that's what I do. Their beds are a mess usually. Maybe I tried here to get a few people involved. I got a little school involved at our bus stop. We did a fence, we cleaned it up. I pruned all the trees and we planted stuff, but very quickly it got destroyed, as everything in the streets do. But that might be an interesting approach also with the schools. For Ms. Petaway, you know, with your students, it's a great. Plus, you can get help. You can call Jason Stein at the stewardship program at the Parks Department. He's in charge of the stewards, and they can bring tools and mulch, and also Trees New York. Sam Bishop is really helpful in terms of getting supplies to you, so you can get the kids digging and scraping and protecting these trees. And other than that, I can't think of anything else other than good job. Keep it up. I'm with you 100%. I also want to do a program at the Dock Street School. I don't know if any of you would be interested in working with that. They have some nice, they have actually a little island where the kids all go through, which is pretty well unkept. So that's a great project. It's a little forest, and I've been taking care of it, but you know, by myself, it's a little difficult. I got a lot on my plate. So that, and then I also thought of having them do the planters outside the school. They painted them yellow now, so kids wouldn't trip over them. The two trees put in this terrible little low metal things, so people are tripping all over them. At any rate, that might be an interesting project. I'd love to work with you on that if you think that would be interesting. I was going to go over to the school and I've started it already, but like I said, with all the things, but I thought that might be interesting. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can get it through Barbara. She'll give you all my information, and we can work together on getting this thing resolved. Thank you.
Great. So if there are no other questions from committee members, I have a couple of questions. First, I'm hoping that our presenters are going to share their slides with the district office so that we could make them available on our website. And I took a lot of notes, but I didn't want to snap pictures of the slide because there's a lot of really good information. So I'd appreciate that. Shakara, a question for you. I was wondering, how did you promote the program? How did you attract the students for the program?
That's a great question. So I actually reached out to all of the schools in the area and emailed administrators and let them know that this program was happening and to share it with their students. The timing was a little weird because it was summer and so they were off for break, but they were able to share with their students because it started a couple weeks after the school year officially started. I also teamed up with our wonderful partners at Friends of Commodore Barry Park, who have great relationships at Farragut, Ingersoll, and Whitman houses. And so they shared some of that information within those NYCHA residences as well. But interestingly enough, when we asked the teens how they had heard about the program, all of them were saying that they heard of it like from word of mouth. So I'm not really sure who was sharing it with them, but the ones who signed up, and we did get a good, I think we had about like 50 or so applicants for the 12 slots we had available.
Oh.
So we did get a good turnout for this first cohort. And so I'm expecting it to definitely increase for the summer as well.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. Michelle, I have a question for you. You mentioned working on sustainability plans. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about them, what that would entail.
We're working on a Central Park Conservancy sustainability plan, so looking at how to reduce our environmental impact and how to continue like restoring different ecosystems and natural areas within the park. And so that's covering things like water use, so reducing our water use, unnecessarily watering vegetation, being more strategic about it, thinking about the different lakes and ponds within the park and figuring out a way to recycle that water. We're also looking at, our leaves, like, are there opportunities for us to leave leaves on the ground so that we can help with biodiversity? Something I'm really excited about is we're looking at how to do low mow or native grasses within some of the landscapes. So rather than mowing, which is, takes energy, and we have to find a way to do that, finding other ways where maybe we can let grass grow a little taller, which can be good for different species. But then also just getting our staff involved and thinking about the ways we recycle on site, where we're getting our energy sources from, where we're sourcing our plants, making sure it's like local, really leaning on the Greenbelt Native Plant Center. And so it's been a whole team effort. We've been running workshops with our whole staff, and are hoping to do it with the public and also our volunteers as well, to hear about what they want to do. But I know that Brooklyn Bridge Park is looking at a sustainability plan. Greenwood Cemetery is looking at a sustainability plan. The Parks Department has some guidelines on sustainability. I think it was about 10 years ago now, though. So really just trying to find the space and time and commitment to do it.
That sounds great. I'm going to look now. I know we have some members of the community board outside of our committee. Does anybody have any questions? Betty?
Yes, thank you all for a wonderful presentation. You really packed so much information into the time. It's stunning. I'm looking at this from many perspectives, but specifically through the current state and the opportunities in school playgrounds and for school gardens. I'm a school garden advocate. I am involved with organizations, and we support the school gardens. And just even from the point of the care of the trees, schools sometimes need to get trees pruned, even if they're teaching the children how to take care of the tree beds and so on. And everything is an obstacle, or I should say many things are, such as getting the trees pruned. And there are a lot of opportunities within the schoolyards themselves to develop school gardens, which will help the climate with the drainage through the soil rather than the asphalt, through growing edibles that the children can learn about healthy food. There are so many connections. So I'm wondering what any of your organizations are doing to really look at schoolyards as a potential area of interest and advocacy in this area of climate change.
Looks like a difficult question, Betty.
To be continued, okay.
Hannah, I
Thank
think
you.
Hannah has something.
I can just share one quick resource if you're not already aware of the work for the Trust for Public Land. They are doing exactly what you're describing. They're a coalition member, and I would definitely check them out for learning more about that specific intervention, because I agree. And it's not an area
Yeah,
that
I mean, I
work on.
totally agree with you, and we've participated in several of their projects, but that's a big project. It's funded, it goes through various stages and so on. And not all schools have the opportunity to work with them. So the average school that doesn't have that opportunity is what I'm talking about. But yes, there are several, and there's a new one in our community district. PS 38 on Pacific Street is now getting their schoolyard redone with the Trust for Public Land. So yes, we're aware. We'd love more. It's a question of funding, but for the average school that doesn't have it, your groups and other groups like it need to consider, how do we use that open space to help with the climate change issue?
Yeah, that's, and my only other response to it would be for this, idea of a community board resolution. If that's something that you think would be a front and center point to make in terms of a Million More Trees initiative, that those trees should go, for example, in schoolyards, and that should be done. If you've got ideas on how to implement that, again, this document is meant to be made as toothy and kind of directive as you want it to be. So if that's kind of something that you think is a need, specifically in your community board, but elsewhere, I would definitely include that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to distribute. I don't think the members of the community have had a chance to look at that resolution yet, so I'm going to distribute that and let them think about it. And if they have, I think that's an excellent suggestion that you just made about the gardens and trees for the gardens. Also, I know in participatory budgeting, sometimes that might be an avenue for getting some funding for school gardens. And I just saw recently, I think from the borough president's office, there's some opportunities for funding grants. I'm not sure if they're over yet, or I think it came out last week. There was a notice about it. All of that takes a lot of work and resources. So now I'm going to open questions up to others on this call. Does anybody else have a question for any of our presenters? Richard, let me just see if anyone else before we go back to you. All right, Richard.
All right. I just wanted to make mention that the state forestry department, I think it was the forestry department, when I was teaching high school out in Brownsville, Betty, what I did was I asked my principal, and we took land right in front of the building, those little green things, and we redid them. We redid the front so beautifully. Just five or six of my students and myself, we went out there, and the principal was really excited. The other thing we did was I contacted the state, I think it was a forestry. They give away seedlings, little tiny.
Yeah.
And what we did was I got a batch of them. They sent more than I needed. And what we did was we went around to the neighbors. And we knocked on their door and said, would you like a seedling? And, you know, they planted them. And I think I mentioned it once in some other group. Just before the pandemic, I went out to Brownsville again, where I was teaching, just to see how the trees were doing. And they're doing great. They're just, you know, we planted about 30 trees. And people loved them, just little things like this. Now they're giant trees. I mean, it's just exciting. So that might be a thing also for that young lady who has the kids. I forgot her name. To check into. Kids could start offering neighbors trees to plant in their front yard or in a hole that they, you know, a tree, an empty tree lot or something. So just a thought.
That reminds me of another question I have. Are there specific trees that I think there are that hold up better in this environment of New York City? Trees that we should be looking to plant, or trees that we really shouldn't be? Sometimes I've heard the Parks Department say that certain trees have a limited shelf life. So does anyone have any suggestions of those? What are the better trees, or what trees should not seek to plant?
I can jump in. So definitely, like, the cliche of the right tree for the right place is very much, you know, our motto. The City Parks Department does have, that's part of what their forestry team does. So for street trees, they do have, you know, a specific list, and there's, you know, that's part of like the permitting process, and making that determination is, you know, they're really considering the ecology, you know, of that particular area. So, you know, for example, especially thinking of, I mean, we're all sort of coastal, but for people out, you know, really more facing on the ocean side, you know, making sure that they're good salt tolerance, things like that. The most common street tree in New York is the London plane tree, which I'm sure everyone has seen. They're really beautiful, tall, the kind of patchy, peely bark. They look a lot like, you know, a sycamore. So those are pretty good for, you know, there's a reason they're everywhere. They're pretty good for salt, for our environment. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of science that goes into it. That's way beyond my point.
We have heard the City Parks Department talk about those trees. I think, aren't there quite a few of them in Fort Greene Park?
Yes, those are actually some of our biggest trees in the park.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Oh, Andrew, yes.
Yeah. Barbara, this is not so much of a question, but I really said this is a fantastic program, and good luck if you can get it all in place. When I was starting earlier on the board, we had something similar of a type of a project, and we were doing, we went through our community board to try to get a tree census in our area. We succeeded it, but that whole study is lost somewhere. And the whole direction it was directed to at that time was really the asthma problem that is really north of Fort Greene Park. It always was an issue there. However, when we look at two things that kind of were in the way or never let us get there, was that for some reason, we were never allowed to give suggestions to plant trees at the NYCHA housing land. I mean, there's so much acreage there, but we were like told, you know, like, don't bother, don't bother submitting suggestions to planting trees there. So, you know, I hope that doesn't happen again. Maybe because you got the green teams now, maybe that'll be slightly different. But if you look at another issue, the pits that go around trees historically have been much too small. And because they're small, the sidewalks are uprooted. Okay. And when you get landlords to talk about increasing the size of the tree pits, they don't want to hear about it because they've had bad experiences for 20, 30 years with the old street pits that they've always had to, you know, break up and repave. So good luck with that, because one of the things that could save us is increasing the size of the tree pits in street trees. Because without that, you could plant all the trees you want, but if the roots keep coming up and, you know, we're going to take down those trees because they're uprooting sidewalks, the game is over. the other place is that if you walk up and down Flushing Avenue, which just saw major work in the last 5 years, there aren't too many trees planted there. Hardly any. You've got a whole probably mile and a half of street, straight away and not many trees. And I don't know who's responsible for that, but just, we missed an opportunity. That would have been taking care of the asthma problem in that sector, but no trees were there. The other point that kind of irked me a little bit, and this is, the whole idea is funding. Funding is key to this. So I hope everybody finds the way to talk to council people and whoever to provide the funding. But we also had issues with the park department. They wouldn't want to touch a piece of land unless they got money to fund it or take care of it. We lost a beautiful tract of land in Brooklyn Navy Yard because the park didn't want to take it up. If you take a look, Google map, and take a look where where that hospital is in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, it was the last piece of tract of land to get it as a park. We didn't get it because we didn't have the money to fund it. But yet Steiner Studio, who doesn't, the principals don't even live in our district, got it. And we lost probably, I don't know how much, 30 acres of a parkland there. And it was a question of funding. Parks Department wouldn't take it because they didn't have the money to fund it. So we've got to bite that bullet, somehow find that funding. And that's.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
That's
I
it.
think we heard tonight that maybe it was Hannah who said it, that the NYCHA houses do have a significant number of trees, even more so than other places.
But they need more.
Oh, well, who doesn't? Who doesn't need more? So, all right. Last chance for question. Oh, Betty,
Yeah.
you get the final word. Okay.
Thank you. This has been fabulous. Okay, I do want to say that I'm helping to organize a Borum Hill Street Tree Stewardship event. It's in conjunction with Lincoln Wrestler, Big Reuse, the Borum Hill Association, on Saturday, March 4th, from 10 to 12. And we will be having mulch and tools and gloves and working on street trees in our neighborhood. So these efforts are happening throughout and generally through, voluntary groups and the coalitions. Yeah.
All right. Again, I want to thank everyone. Our next subject is going to be the chair's report, and I do have a couple of things that relate to trees. If our presenters want to stay for those, I can't thank you enough for this. You need to leave. We understand it, but you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. So thank you again. So in terms of my report, I just wanted to mention to my committee members that June 10th is health fair that we are helping to support with the HES committee. So one of my main contribution is I volunteered to be there the day of, and I didn't realize when I volunteered to do that also gave me the responsibility of encouraging other people to volunteer to work on that day. So if you are available on June 10th, I think the event is from 11 to also setting up and dismantling at the end. If you have any time that you might be available on that date, please email me and let me know that you're interested. I also wanted, if you're in Lincoln Wrestlers district, and you just got his newsletter, may be aware of the council members' tree effort that he's conducting. He wants to plant 3,400 trees in the district, and he is looking to do that over the next 4 years. And he says the Parks Department actually has committed to planting 2,200 trees next 4 years, and that his office is going to look to fund an additional 1,200 trees. And so find out more about that if you go to Lincoln's website. Then thanks to Betty, I know about, there's this fabulous event being conducted at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden on Saturday, March 11th, all about trees. Day program. And if you, unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town that day, and I'm really sorry, I'm going to miss it, but I'm going to look into it more. I don't know if any of the program is included, but I'm going to look closely at the agenda because there may be something there might be interested in coming to our committee and talking. But if you have any time for March 11th, I suggest you go to the Garden's website and check out their program for that. And that's what I have at the moment. Again, for committee members, if you haven't noticed in the chat, Taya put in their applications ended to February 23rd. So some of you may be interested to know that. Now I'm jumping to other committee business. Does any member have something they want to discuss? Any, is your hand up for this?
Actually, it was up. I did want to get in one last comment about the trees.
Sure, go ahead. We still have most of our presenters.
Good, I'm glad they're still here. I just wanted to give my reaction, what I got out of this meeting, what I hopefully seem to have learned is we need the right trees. We need to know where the right trees belong in the right places, the right species. That's the scientific end of it, which is, of course, I think, what the most important thing to get it right. They have to be deep enough in the ground, and this is to answer Andrew a little bit. They need to be deeper in the ground because we all remember growing up, all those trees breaking up the sidewalks and the cement. They weren't deep enough. It's not just the size of the pits. They have to be deep enough so the roots don't come up and break up everything and just cause havoc and problems. And the other comment I have is the Parks Department, guess what? Maybe 1% of the city budget. Where does the other 99% go?
Of the city budget?
In the city, where does the other 99% of the money, the budget money in the city go? Parks Department is not important enough to get much more than maybe 1%. I remember arguing, do we get only a 0.5%? Let's get it to 1%. What, it's preposterous. To me, it's just preposterous that no more of this city budget money can go to parks. We know how important the parks are and the environment and all that. And of course, we are Parks Department people. We maybe care a little bit more than others where they on this issue, where they may have other issues that they care more about. People are interested in schools, or people are interested in DOT issues. But we get maybe 1%. We're arguing to get 1%. Where does the other 99% money?
The answer to some of your questions are being put in the chat, specifically a link to the budget, and then information. Apparently, it's not quite 1%. And I think there have been some commitments made, and I don't know that the present mayor is of the same mind. That's what has been discussed previously. So,
well, I've heard him say he's interested in putting more money in. Like it's a goal of his, but it's still getting it to 1% that I've heard him talk about. And I can't get my mind around. We get maybe, hopefully we want 1%, get it up to that when they, 99% of the rest of the budget money, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right that there can't be more money for the parks and for the streets and for the trees and these gardens and schools. That if you find the right person in the Board of Ed that cares enough and could get it to the kids and into their schools, that would work a lot. But I don't want to sidetrack from my point here. It just doesn't seem right or fair or even logical that only 0.5% is what we kept hearing since I've been in this committee that the parks get. It doesn't sound fair, right, or logical that that's all that we get, all that the parks get, all that basically the environment is getting, because that's who the parks is.
I
The
think as
environment.
individuals, we need to advocate and strongly about this, connected to organizations that also do that advocacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of advocacy groups, and we heard here how it's so hard for them to coordinate amongst themselves. They all try to do the right thing in Central Park, in Fort Greene Park, in probably Marine Park, and every other park, but they're like dots, they're islands that are having a hard time, although they are trying, from what we hear here, to get coordinated amongst themselves to tighten this net that should be holistic, more holistic, under the umbrella of a more robustly budgeted parks department, monetarily.
Lenny, there's an awful lot of information being put into the chat that responds to the
Yeah,
issues you're raising. So I think you should take a look at those.
I will, but I still, that's my main takeaway from all of this and all my years now that I've been on this committee. It's like begging, it's begging for everything. And you know, this is the biggest city in the biggest, you know, the most, this is New York City. This isn't, it's supposed to be the greatest city in the world. And we have to beg to have trees planted. We have to have volunteers pruning trees, which is its necessity. We have to have all these things from volunteers and this program up in the Bronx, this program in South Brooklyn, that they all want the same objective, but they're not coordinated the way that would make it so much better.
Well, I get the impression there is a lot of coordination. Check out the links in the chat, particularly the New Yorkers for Parks. So I think probably all share your concern that parks benefit.
I see a few of these events. I see a few of these
benefit from more funding being made available.
I see NY4P for Parks agrees with me. You know, if I look too much at the chats, I will split my attention too much from.
Taya, maybe you could put some of those links.
But I see the gist of what's being said here.
Committee members. After this, you know how to do that better than I. So, all right. Well, thank you, Lenny, for your concerns.
Okay,
we're
sure.
now going to quorum. Does anybody here have something for quorum? Just raise your hand. I have something. Andrew Otto, I see you're on the line. I have a question for you. If someone's interested in learning how to play pickleball, you're really bipolar, so you wouldn't answer that question. Okay. So anyway, does anybody have anything else? Andrew, did you want to give us an update on your advocacy efforts?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me? I don't know where my video is. Maybe on here.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure I have an update to give. I was curious as to what the next steps might be since we got feedback from the Parks Department for the proposal. And I know they had some feedback for us, and there were some things maybe that we were going to say back to them about like maybe making the proposal more specific. I actually do have a couple of updates I can provide to you, but I'll just ask that first.
Want to know what next steps are? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I know that the Parks Department gave us feedback through the statement of needs. I was at that meeting a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and I was wondering. I mean, I can talk to Taya about this offline if that would be more appropriate too.
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, cool. I'll follow up there. More general update. We've been contacted by the Dumbo Bid after they were in one of our meetings here a couple months ago because they were really curious about what we were doing, what we were proposing. And they recommended that we really double down on the Bridge Park 3 stuff because of the upcoming BQE renovation, the huge project that's going to happen. So there are a couple of BQE meetings, community visioning meetings coming up soon. I think the first one's February 28th. And they recommended that we go to those, talk to people there, try to make some connections, and also try to get a few more groups on board with our proposal. So we've got a roller skating group who's joined us in our coalition. We've been trying to find some of those for a while. So the few of those around the city, and they're variously organized, but we've got like, they really like what we're trying to do. And so we're collaborating with them. Still working on women's ball hockey. The last I heard, they were going to have a board meeting last week, and I've been trying to get a response from them recently. We also are starting to investigate a park in Community Board 3, but we're right at the beginning of that. Some members of our coalition went to their parks meeting last week, and we got some friends group contact there for a park we're gonna like look into and see how that goes. That's St. Andrews Park, but you know, we're just trying to keep our options open.
Okay, that sounds great. Sounds like you're working hard on it. Anything else for community forum? All right, the next item on our agenda is adjournment. So hearing nothing further, do I have a motion to adjourn? Andrew and Richard? Okay, anyone opposed? All right, well, thank you again to our presenters and everyone who participated tonight. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Have a good night. Think Greene.
Good night.